I'm James Richardson. I'm a Gartner analyst. If you've seen the Analytic and BI platform Magic Quadrant at any point during the past 10 years, then you've probably seen some of my work already. Obviously, as a Gartner analyst, I'm exposed to all kinds of organizations, different lines of business, public and private sector, very, very varied and around the world. What do they have in common right now? Turbulence. They're trying to deal with massive amounts of change in the world. They're trying to be able to respond to that very quickly. They're trying to be agile. And one of the mechanisms that allows them to get to that agility is obviously data and analytics. And we've seen a massive uptick in questions about data analytics in the last year to 18 months. And I don't think it's coincidental. Organizations are trying to use data as a competitive weapon to deal with demands on them in terms of their agility. So we got a fascinating panel. So the roundtable discussion is about agility. The title is Becoming an Agile Enterprise, Empowering Your Organization Through Integration, Transformation, and Applied BI Strategies. And we've got 4 speakers from very different organizations that are going to introduce themselves in a moment. But I'm going to task them with one little thing to break the ice. So as well as saying who they are, where they work, and what they do, maybe a little bit on their background, I want them to say one word that sums up what data agility means to them right now. And we'll go first, I think, to Megan. Please, Megan, over to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Megan Fortenberry. I'm the Director of Technology and Continuous Improvement at RWI Logistics. RWI Logistics is a third-party logistics solutions provider specializing in cold chain execution. We do a ton of fresh produce as well as grocery and food and beverage. My team and I are very passionate about delivering data and analytics and insightful visualizations to not only our teams internally, but our customers and our carrier partners. And we also are always looking for continuous improvement opportunities to really help our customers save on cost as well as network optimization. James, I'm going to cheat and I'm going to give a 2-word answer. Usually these 2 words are always combined together, and really data agility, what it means to me is competitive advantage. So in our space, in the logistics and transportation industry, many of our competitors, we're all using the same data sources for market insights and intelligence. And being an organization who can harness data agility means that we can get ahead. We can find those innovation solutions quicker, and we can deliver results to our customers faster. So it's really about data agility becoming a competitive advantage for us.
Perfect. Thank you, Megan. I hope we're not going to get inflation where we go from 2 words and upwards, but we'll see. So I think we'll follow this round, and we'll give Sierra from Disney Streaming Services her chance to talk a little bit about what she does and what matters to her every day, and then give me 1 or maybe 2 words on what data agility means to her.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Sierra. I'm a business analyst from Disney. I, in the past, have focused a lot with customer service data specific to Disney Plus and ESPN Plus. And so kind of to jump off, I am going to give a 1-word answer on what I think kind of data agility means. So when I think about data agility, I think about accessibility. And what I mean by that is, oftentimes if you are just watching TV or you're just, consuming some kind of media, you'll come up with a question, you'll be like, oh, what's that actor? Or like, they're just questions. We're consistently asking questions just as people in the world. And so, if you have those kinds of questions, oftentimes you can like pick up your smartphone and just Google the answer. And I think really adapting that same kind of premise to the data that you're consuming for your organization is critical, because then you can go and you can ask these questions, and being able to get that answer so quickly in the same way that you would like do a Google search, having data that's agile, it makes that so much more accessible. So accessibility is the one I'm going with.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sierra. Very good. So we're going to jump across the Atlantic now to London, where Fred is. Fred, please, where are you working? What do you do? And what do you care about? What's your one word?
Thanks, and hi to everyone. I'm Fred Serval. I work for Lego, and my job is the Director of Search and Analytics for Lego's internal advertising agency. The advertising agency of the Lego Group is an organization that does communication assets that are of a very wide variety. We do everything from the advertising that you see on TV to the actual physical box in which the set is in. So it's a pretty wide range of communication assets, and this means that we have a pretty diverse and complex ecosystem when it comes to data. Data coming from stores, data coming from advertising, data coming from a lot of different digital platforms. And if I'm thinking about what is digital agility for me, because I work at Lego, I think the way I see it, and I don't know if you guys are using a lot of, or building a lot of Legos, but for me, data agility is what we call a base plate. So that's the foundational piece that we actually build all our sets on. So, and that's really for me what is the important element. It's based on data agility that we're able to build so many elements of our marketing strategy going forward, understanding our consumers, understanding our communications and its efficiency. So that's the way I would say, and I kept it to one word. So I hope that you'll be happy with that one. But for me, it's the base plate. Yeah.
Oh, we all know the Lego base plates, right? Or Lego, as we call it here, Legos, I believe in the US. Yeah, absolutely, really good. I'd question whether it's one word or two, but we won't get hung up on taxonomies right now.
In our SKU catalog, it is a single word.
Okay, given. Very good. Thank you, Fred. Erica, last but not least, Erica, do you want to tell us exactly the same, please, for you?
Okay, will do. Hi, my name is Erica Janowicz. I'm the Senior Director of Business Intelligence at RxA. We are a Domo partner. I have a unique background in actuarial science, and I discovered early in my career that I enjoy applying mathematics to data for analytics. So absolutely love to learn, and that path has allowed me to use my passion across business and IT to accelerate digital transformation and really specialize in creating and implementing data and analytic strategies across organizations of all size. For my one word, maybe customer, or if I can use a dash, customer centric, really placing that end consumer in the forefront and providing accountability on process drives data agility. Your why becomes the driving force for implementation and continuous improvement, and is very much in line even with our agile principles in software development, right? We should satisfy our customer, our data consumer, and we want to provide them with a competitive advantage with data. So we need to give attention to technical excellence and design to really enhance our agility.
Brilliant. You almost brought it all together there for us, Erica. Nice summary. It's interesting, but Megan started us off and Erica finished talking about continuous improvement. And I think that's one of the things that I find on my inquiry calls is this idea of agility is it's not a one and done, right? This is something that you just got to keep working at. It keeps flowing through the organization. And just because you've got it right to begin with, or you've got it right to the level you're at, it's a constant battle to keep moving up the levels because agility expands through each other areas. Anyway, so that's great. Thank you for that fantastic opening. Megan, I think we're going to go over to you now. So Fred talked about base plates. What was the situation like for you at RWI when you started off this journey towards data agility? Were there any base plates there? Did you have to go buy the kit? How did you begin that journey? That would be good to know.
Yeah, certainly. We definitely had some base plates and some foundation to start with. But I guess how I would categorize that is it was very inside the box. So when we started with Domo, we had no data warehouse, and we had reporting that was simply extracts out of our data sources and translation through Excel. And it was very specific to the data source, and there wasn't any comparison against other data sources in looking at market trends or other factors that impact our environment and impact the execution of our business. It was done very singularly and in very much single buckets and use cases. And so in order to really start our journey with data agility, we had to change our mindset. We really had to start thinking outside of the box and in a relative manner on how do all of these data sources connect with one another, and what are those key unique ways to connect them so that we could transition into a foundation that was much more flexible yet robust. And really for us, it was the idea to change from becoming very singular and inside the box with every one of our data sources and thinking outside of the box and creating what we call a data lake approach, where there's object relation and our data sits in these lakes. It's connected through unique identifiers, and we're able to go in and fish in any of these lakes and pull in the relevant data to then build those visualizations. So where we started and how we reacted would likely take us days, if not weeks, to build and get to the point of providing the visualization and the insight to our internal teams and to our customers. And where we've come with thinking outside of the box and being able to have a much more flexible foundation now enables us to change more rapidly, to build quicker, and to really respond in a matter of hours or maybe days versus days or weeks or months.
I think that's it. I mean, I deliberately didn't at the beginning of this session give Gartner's view of what this is, but I think the capability around agility is the speed to turn data into value for the organization. I mean, that's really what we're talking about here. Interesting, your in and out, outside the box thing. Do you mean by that reaching to exogenous data, to external data sets as well, to stop your analytics being too internally focused? Is that part of the box that you're thinking about as well as the data asset itself?
Yeah, and it's really thinking ahead that sometimes these data sources that we hadn't really thought outside of the box about, we didn't think about them because we didn't really know the answer of how we would use that data. But instead thinking outside of the box to say, we know there's value in this data, let's start bringing it into our ecosystem and let's start doing some data exploration with it and figure out how it may connect to our current data that we look at, really allowed us to expand that thinking and build a better ecosystem for bringing these data sources in.
So I see Erica nodding. So that resonates with you about both the box and perhaps looking outside. I mean, one thing that we find is if you're looking outside, you tend to find more leading indicators. Does that resonate with any of you? Perhaps Erica first. Is that something you've seen as an aspect of agility?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think too, and I was kind of smiling when I was nodding along with Megan, because actually last month I was helping to promote a program for STEM with middle school and high school girls. And, I was really trying to just figure out how to best describe what I do, right? What data science is and why it's so important and rewarding. And the best way that I really could come to think about this was to note 4 main skill sets, right? So understanding how a business works, math, computer science, communication skills, trying to look at it as the approach of a data scientist, like a traditional scientist, using the scientific method, and then explaining why data roles are so important today. And of course, actually, I use Legos to do this. So I think, Fred would appreciate that, where, we really create and work with data that can be as unique and many as all of us, right? So we have so many varieties and so much data. And it can be hard to find out what's important in a box of 1 million data points and what's important in another box of 1 billion data points. And can we combine them? And I think that's where a lot of organizations start when they start thinking strategy and data initiatives. They have a box of 1 million Legos, and they have a box of a bigger box of 1 billion Legos, and they all get dumped on the floor. So they join their data points, but it sounds painful, especially with Legos on the floor, right? Organizations want this fully built structure. They've seen the builds by Lego enthusiasts of the Taj Mahal, Batmobile, I think it's pretty cool, fully functional homes, but they just have the pieces right now. And I think that's where you usually start. You walk into a playroom, you step on a few bricks, and you're frantically searching for this instruction booklet. I hope I didn't go too far with the analogy.
No, the analogy is an interesting one, because the question is the vision to know what to build, right? The Lego set comes with the instructions, whereas in many cases, engagement with the business is the only, you kind of making your own instruction set as you go along, and that's not an easy thing to do. In fact, I think we'll give Sierra a chance. So the next question I was going to ask is, to be agile, and Megan kind of hinted to this, you need to assemble and integrate a lot of diverse data, effectively. I mean, how do you handle that, Sierra, at Disney? I mean, what's the mechanism to do that, and how is it changing or changed?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, running with that analogy of the Legos, it's really kind of pointed, because I think that there are two main concepts that I find are most helpful when promoting data agility. One is really just understanding the big picture, understanding what that ecosystem looks like. So when you're importing multiple different data sets from different tools, they're oftentimes in wildly different formats. And sometimes, like you have one of those Legos that's like a 3-prong, and you can't put it on this one because it doesn't fit. And so you have to understand, okay, well, this needs to connect. What other pieces can I use to make this tell the story that I'm trying to get it to tell? And so, much to kind of your exact point, you need that instruction book. And sometimes you might not have one that was given to you. Sometimes you really just have to sit and understand, okay, this is my end goal. I want to be able to answer this question. I want to be able to solve for this problem. And I know that I'm going to have these inputs. What other pieces of information might I ask about this data moving forward? And so it's effectively giving you an instruction manual that you kind of have to build yourself based on the data that you're coming up with. But then you know what your end result is going to be. So you know what pieces you need to really put together to get to that end result. I think kind of in that same token, I think the other aspect that is critical, and this is something that I've had a leader tell me before, and it's just, I've always worked in a really fast-paced environment, and this is just something that I've stuck to this idea, and it's the idea of ruthlessly prioritizing. And so I think that is something that, especially in a fast-paced environment, is a great thing to keep to. But when you're looking at data, when you're trying to put together like a puzzle, for example, you put the frame together first, because you know that that's going to be the most effective way to get to your end result, and you'll be able to use those as reference points. And I think that that's really important too, when you have this full ecosystem of data that you're looking at, and you know that your end result is going to look like that picture on the box. Being able to use those reference points to help guide you further, faster, is critical.
So I think that's very true. I think you have to pick a start point and take a position, and then you're going to fill the middle in as you go along. I think that's been, how we've done this for a long time. What I'm thinking when I hear Disney streaming, though, is, low latency, high speed, maybe real-time stuff. Has your approach to agility always included that, or are you is that a journey for you that you're on, sort of getting closer to the streaming data, much as you stream video?
I mean, I think it really depends, and this is something that, I've dealt with in other organizations too, outside of Disney, is that it really depends on what questions you're trying to answer. And so, there's definitely needs for certain questions that have, in that same kind of context of ruthlessly prioritizing, like these are the questions that are more critical to answer now, because they're going to help us get further faster. So I think it really depends. It depends on what your business does, whether or not, what types of information you poured in, on the efficacy, on how they help drive your business forward. I think when you're looking at businesses that really have to make changes in real time, having information that updates quickly is going to be much more critical when you're trying to make these changes. Because, if you, for example, if you're working with a real-time product and you have a latency of 2 hours on something that you're looking at, 2 hours might be too much. Like if your product is down for 2 hours, a lot of businesses, that's way too long. And actually,
it really depends
2 hours is way too long.
Yeah, it's the decision window, right? I mean, for many cases, it's not applicable. So it's what is the appropriate decision window. So we've talked about expanding the view of data, building a foundational set of elements. But the question is whether the organization gets it. whether the organization understands where it's moving. And there are very often obstacles to that. I think Erica kind of addressed a little bit of that. But Fred, you know, when you're looking at data agility, what are the blockers or some of the things that you had to overcome to kind of move down the data agility journey?
Well, I think it really depends of the organization you're part of, and I think that the blockers that I'm confronted to, it might not necessarily be the case where when your company is either 100% digital or where data is so linked to your business model. The blockers that you have in a traditional company that is actually doing consumer products that are being made, shipped, like the whole process of time to market is 18 months. And I think that Sarah was making a really good point around how fast your data needs to be depends on how fast you can make decisions. On our side, we don't always have in all of the areas the possibility to make fast decisions necessarily. So for me, most of the blockers for a very engineering, manufacturing-based company, it's going to be mostly the organization changing the mindset, showing that we can create value out of the data and showing how it can be made, but still keeping in mind the legacy that we have of everything that has been done before. Data at Lego has been very rich for a very long time. We have a lot of information. Every mold has an ID. Every information exists, so we know everything that how we make the SKUs, like from beginning to end, and really understanding that there are new ways, other points of other data points that we can capture, that it can inform some of our decisions, that it can change the way we do our work. So doing that whole organizational change, convincing people, showing them other ways, without completely putting away what is already working and has made the company that we're in one of the biggest toy manufacturer in the world, but just showing that there are other stuff to do would be probably the major blocker. But it's also a great opportunity because it forces you to sharpen your arguments, to really convince people, and it's people who know their business. And I think it's an interesting blocker to have because it forces you to really be really good at your job in a way, so that you really have to show the value of what you can bring to the table.
You are talking about one of my favorite things, which is using data stories and data storytelling. I think, you know, moving beyond how we've just visualized stuff in the past is incredibly important. People, innate human understanding of tales with a beginning, middle, and an end, or a beginning, middle, and series of possible endings, I think is what we would say in our space. So yeah, I think it's really important. Fred, I'm going to ask you a question. When you're thinking about the base plate that you talked about at the beginning, and we're really working this Lego analogy, so why not? What do you, are there particular elements? I mean, Megan talked about data lake architectures. And the lack of a data warehouse when she started this off. Are there particular things that you think comprise that foundational set of elements that drive agility?
And I think that when we think about data agility, we often fast start thinking about tools, about data access and everything. But for me, one of the core elements of data agility, and what has been one of my most interesting and biggest challenge when I took that position and starting to think about what will be that base plate, that is actually the people who are going to do this work, and making sure that have the right people, the right number of people, then they have the right kind of skills. The tools that they're going to use is something different. And I know we were in a conference for Domo. Domo is great. That's not what I'm saying. But I think that what is more important is the people that you have in your team, making sure that you put them in a situation where they're going to be resilient. They're going to be able to adapt to different kind of situations. They're going to be active in understanding the ecosystem in which they work within, identify those opportunities, and have the confidence and the skill sets that will make them find new ways of doing things. Because as you were saying, what is important when you have millions of bricks on the floor is having more or less an idea of where you want to go to. But the thing is that from point A to point B, when you have that many bricks, there is an infinite ways of going from point A to point B. So to build the solution, and the idea is, okay, how do I make sure that the people in my team, they have this vision of finding an efficient way or new way to do it that we haven't think about. And I think for me, that's one of the core elements of the base plate. And then on top of that, you think about, okay, what are the tools? How do we empower them? What are the solutions? But for me, that's the core.
That echoes fantastically what Sierra said. I mean, Sierra's idea of being ruthless focus or ruthless prioritization or something like that is design thinking, right? It's what is the fundamental problem that we're trying to resolve first, or the next problem that we're trying to resolve, and how do we work our way back from that? So I think I endlessly say to people on my Gartner customer inquiry calls that the technology is the easy bit. The organizational stuff is the what takes effort and time, and not just data literacy training, which we hear about all the time, but trying to understand how they think about data and where they're starting from is really important. And I think that might lead us nicely to Erica's next question, which is when you're looking at the projects you're involved in, what did you wish you knew before you tipped the Lego box on the floor? What is it that you kind of wish you knew at the beginning? What doesn't always go right? I think that's really important for the people that are listening to try and learn from perhaps some of that painful stepping on those bricks. Yeah. Maybe.
I would say that there probably are 4 main questions that I always start with now on any data initiative, and I would get around to them, right? But I really wish that I knew to start with these years ago. The first is really, who is the consumer, or who are the consumers of the data, right? Keeping your end consumer in mind at all times. And this really helps the team focus on your end deliverable, ownership, accountability. I would say number 2, are my governance initiatives aligned with the company's future and our corporate initiatives? So I know the most exciting topic of governance, but you need to understand where the organization is moving, from what data-driven decisions you will need to potential architecture changes if the company is looking at new systems, right? The reality is that we can't usually build once and move on from it. You have to maintain it, likely integrate new sources. And if you're not focused on some of the governance and maintenance initiatives early on, I would bet that there's some distrust around this data. I think, third, what systems integrations are required to tell a story with data. Many companies are moving towards integrated ERP, point of sale systems, and that's great, right? It helps consolidate a lot of data from multiple sources right there. But you will likely still need to integrate more: social media, consumer sentiment, external data. What it took away from my experience is that it's great to start with a proof of concept for one area to get your buy-in and support. But you really need to be careful when you piecemeal deliverables by department. To build an integrated speed, you really need to take note of the variety of business use cases, right? A lot of departments will need access to the same data. So kind of take a step back and think holistically how your business operates. And then I think the 4th question is, when can we start? Like, can we start tomorrow? Start somewhere, start anywhere. It doesn't and it won't be perfect, and that's okay. That's why we iterate on projects, on our ETLs, on our machine learning models. So I've collaborated with quite a few leaders in the AI space, and I always find their approach to data absolutely fascinating. It doesn't have to be the cleanest, but you just have to do it. You have to pull the trigger and start with something. So
that's a great, the bunch of things you hit on there. And so the perfect data quality, unicorn tiers, right? That's what that is. You're never going to get there. And for most, how you define the data quality as well is varied by use case and data type, right? So I think that absolutely the worst thing is waiting for perfection. And I'd argue that letting some sunlight into the data is the best way forward, right? So letting people look at it. Just don't let the analytic and BI take the blame for the bad data quality, but let it be seen as a lens, as a window on that stuff. And I've seen that many times. I'm going to ask a question to the team, though. So you mentioned it. You mentioned the G word. You brought up governance. So I'm going to ask a question and see if there's a reaction. Do you think governance is antithetical to agility? Do you think it's against? Is it in the opposite corner to agility, or do you think you can square those two things? Anyone? Megan, what do you think to that? Are you tightly governed? How do you manage your governance and keep being agile at the same time?
Yeah, I would call it selective governance. So I think when we started, we had this idealistic approach that we would build and we would lock down and we would certify and it would apply to everything. And I think we realized that was extremely cumbersome and didn't allow us to be agile. And so it was about being selective, so for us, and I'm sure this applies for everyone else, anything that's financially reported that could be tied back to, our P&L and financial reporting, we're going to lock down and have strict governance around. Other things, right, as it comes to execution and market insights, you know, you had said this before, sometimes you don't have to be perfect, or the data doesn't have to be completely cleansed and pure, right? It's about figuring out and assessing the insights that you're delivering. Does it deliver a quality product that can enable decisions? Because really, it's the data tells the story and enables the insights. It's the people consuming that data that need to take the action. So if that is working for you, and you are not tightly governed, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think again, our approach has been to be selective about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's about a balanced approach. It's about multimodal governance, right? You govern appropriately for the thing. And we forget when we talk about governance and data quality in finance, there's a whole profession. The whole audit profession is data quality for finance. We don't have that luxury anywhere, nor do we need it. I think that's the point, is we govern tightly what needs to be, and we appropriately govern the other areas. We make it secure, of course, we make it appropriate accessibility, but yeah, it's really looking at those layers. And I think that is absolutely an attribute of agility, no doubt about it. So one of the words used in the description for this session, provided by Domo, is transformation, about change, you know, in its broadest sense. And I think we'll go with Sierra first, and then we'll jump around the group. What benefits, what transformational benefits, if you can name any, have come from in Disney of being more agile, or other benefits? You know, what has changed as a result of agility inside the organization?
Yeah, so I think one of the key things that transforming your data really allows you to do is it allows you to look at a big picture, kind of like I was mentioning earlier. It gives you a full view of the ecosystem. And so you could have a situation where you're looking at one piece of data and it's telling you one piece of the story. You can look at a second piece of data, it's telling you another story that doesn't totally make sense with that first one. But then if you were to combine it with the third piece of data and put it together, you can clearly see, like, for example, with customer behavior, you can see that, oh, well, you know, this is happening in this data set and this data set because this is happening in this one. And so, yeah, you could have like 3 different analysts going through and looking at that data individually, and you might get to that same kind of insight at the end of the day, but it's going to take time and it's going to take a lot of resources. Whereas if you have that information and the ability to transform it together, using like ETL, for example, you can really like look at that as one singular data set, get that insight that you're really looking for. And it's going to be the same insight that like everyone that has access to that data is going to be able to arrive at, because it's not going to be that one team looking at data set A, the other team looking at data set B, they don't agree, no one understands what's going on. It's everyone's looking at that full data set and they're getting to conclusion A, because that's really what's happening with that data and telling us the beginning, middle, and end of that story.
So it's interesting, isn't it, that idea of reaction of understanding in an organization that I think is probably a relatively modern one. You're a data-centric organization. I think when Fred hears that from an engineering organization, he's probably thinking, yeah, that, you know, it's different, right? We've done it this way. We've made the Lego. We keep boxing it up. We've been very successful. We're a good organization. What can data teach us? So I'm guessing, maybe, have you seen changes in behavior? I mean, I tend to find the engineering-led organizations somewhat surprisingly are quite slow to change how they do stuff. But you're in marketing, aren't you? And in the advertising side too.
I'm in the marketing side, but the thing that is nice at Lego is that there is a high level of interaction between all the different people working on data, whether they're on the marketing side or the engineering side or even the pure manufacturing side. Like we had some really interesting discussions with a few years ago with some people on the engineering side that were trying to think about making some more advanced AI modelings to know how to tune the molds to actually make sure that they make the pieces the right way faster when you have to calibrate a machine. So those kind of questions. And even if it's completely different kinds of inputs and outputs, the idea is still you have a data set and you're trying to optimize for something. So a lot of the discussions are the same. We have the same language, but we're working on very different things. So I think there is a lot of things that were introduced. And the thing that I would know the most is, for obviously in the marketing area, because that's the part that I'm in. And I think what it brought is clarity over what was happening. As I was saying in the introduction, we're in a very complex ecosystem. We have our own stores, but we also have our partners. We also have people who have Lego on the front door, but are not necessarily fully integrated. We have the amusement parks. There is a lot of different channels to buy our products, online, offline. We have a lot of different communication channels, our own ecosystems. We developed a lot of our own apps because we also want to have secure, safe, and entertaining applications for kids. So that's also something that we do. And what Data Agility brought us is the fact that we could look at this very diverse and complex ecosystem and start actually seeing a bit of clarity, better understanding, okay, what's happening right now across the world, who's spending money on what, which market is doing which activity, what kind of impact does it have in that part of our ecosystem. And I think this level of transparency that we're building, of course, it's just a journey. There is so many things to do, but this is definitely a change. And over the course of the last 3 years, this change has been massive. The kind of discussion that people have within marketing departments, between different departments, from global to local or between regions, is completely different because it's based on things that now everybody knows. It's common knowledge. It creates a sense of accountability for actions that are being taken. And I think this it makes the discussion very healthy in an organization that is very complex, because it's more based on facts. It's more based on stuff that we can actually prove. We know that has been happening, and it's and I think that does a lot for efficient decision making overall. Yeah.
It changes how organizations make decisions. I mean,
Yes.
I'm not a fan of the term data driven, but I understand. I mean, it's a mixture, right? It's a mixture of heuristic and data and all those things. But without the data side of the equation, you're just guessing, in my opinion, very often. So yeah, I think that's really important. Megan, transformational for you. I'm going to pick on a couple of things that people have said, but I want to give you the chance, perhaps, Megan, to talk about, what results have you seen, what outcomes have you had from this agility in RWI?
For us, again, being in the freight and logistics industry, and like I said in my introduction, we service food and beverage providers, food service providers that deliver into restaurants. We also service retail and grocery. And really, for us, when COVID-19 hit, our world turned completely upside down. I know everyone's world turned completely upside down, but from a business standpoint, it was very polar opposite. So we had grocery and retail where we couldn't get trucks loaded and into grocery stores fast enough as shelves were emptying, and food and beverage that provide service to restaurants that were shutting down and completely disappearing overnight. And so for us, data agility really paid off because we had these connections that we had built, and we had kind of had a proactive approach and had started to think about how we were pulling in these market insights. And those connections became so valuable. And relative to the market insights that were coming in, we were seeing data points that we had never seen before. Completely unexpected. You can't rely anymore on gut feel and historical data. You have to be real time in the market. And being able to, the fact that we had already started consuming those and being able to rapidly adjust our visualizations and deliver insights to our employees to be able to take action faster, for us, it really helped us preserve and also grow our volume. We were able to take advantage of growth opportunities in a very volatile time. And we were also able to, it was wonderful relative to risk mitigation for our business. So we were able to have some really critical conversations with our customers and deliver insights and data that yielded innovative solutions and quick response. So that paid dividends for us during the past year.
Brilliant. I think when we've got a little bit of distance from COVID, it will be very interesting to see the organizations that thrived and those that found it harder. And I suspect, correlation not proving causation, of course, that the ones that were more data-centric and analytic-centric were the ones that did well. Question for you. I put a research note out called What If More People Do What If Analysis about 6 months into the COVID crisis, because based on exactly what you said, you couldn't extrapolate really reliably from historical data much anymore for a while. Too much chaos going on. I found that giving people the ability to punch numbers in, come up with scenarios, compare scenarios, tell the stories of those is something that's happened a lot more. Are you seeing that? Is that happening? Do you think more people are doing that kind of scenario testing and what if?
Well, I definitely think so relative to all the volatility that we experienced last year.
Mm-hmm.
Customers want to know kind of, what should I plan for? What would be worst case, and how can I continue to mitigate risk within my business? I think that the more you can do those what if scenarios, and maybe you don't have all of the pieces in place relative to data architecture, but even doing data exploration and going back to Erica's concept of build a proof of concept and really try to understand what value might be provided in some of those what if scenarios and new data exploration. It's really the direction that customers are looking to go to try to plan for more than just what I always expect or see from a historical trend.
Brilliant. So you're all seeing the benefits of agility. Sierra mentioned ETL. Obviously, there are an armory of techniques that are used in data, from data visualization and ETL through to the kind of the approach around data fabric, which is now growing. So the question I'm going to lead off, I suppose we got 4 minutes left. Erica, is directionally for your organization, for RxA, where are you going to go next? What are the projects turning towards now? What's the future for data agility based on what you've seen so far? Or who's pushing it, should we say?
Okay. Well, actually, I'm going to start that by kind of referring to an article that I read a couple of years ago where they debated if an organization could have data agility or scale, but maybe not both. Move fast and respond to opportunities or threats, or have consistent quality information. Give everyone access to data, numbers don't match. Or build sandboxes and data lakes for data scientists, and you get that bottleneck. And I truly believe that with the future and some of the other projects we're working on, we can have both. That, businesses can move fast, they can be confident in their data. And again, it goes back to not just looking at an individual use case, but really those use cases across the organization. IT data dictionaries should, and some have already evolved to business data dictionaries. We're not looking at schema and query anymore. We're actually defining those business metrics so that anyone with access to the data can actually provide the same result, right? What a concept. I also believe that new and future initiatives will follow past game plans, reusing data sources, ETLs, perhaps optimizing them. And I am a firm believer that, the future is active governance initiatives with metadata analysis. So quantifying your quality data.
Yep. So you hit on a couple of things which form core parts of the data fabric model, right? Data catalog, active metadata modeling through ML, those things. Are you all moving down that direction of broadening out your data footprint to include kind of these things in the future too? We'll go Sierra first because she's not spoken for a while. So Sierra, what's directional for Disney on this? If you can say.
Yeah, I think just conceptually, it's continuing to understand, what different inputs we're getting and, optimizing the data from there, which I think, goes broadly across the board. I think, taking into consideration what changes in the data, because, with COVID-19, there's been tons of changes for organizations across the board. So I think it really is just conceptually understanding, to that same point I said earlier, ruthlessly prioritizing what's going to give us the biggest bang for our buck moving forward with our data.
Okay. Fred, what's directional? Are you changing? What are you adding up into the mix?
I think that the direction that we're taking and the focus that we've been having for a while is mostly making sure that we are the knowledge and the understanding and the usage of data is becoming more and more distributed across the organization, that it is not concentrated in specific data department. We're coming from a system where we had BI people that were in a very structured team and potentially provided BI services to other parts of the organization. Then we had the data science expertise that came in and developed a big data platform, developed a Hadoop cluster, and all this is good. They are providing the base set of information, but the idea is to make sure that more and more people are actually using data in autonomy. So making sure, of course, the governance part is really important, making sure that the data is clear for everyone is really important, that the accessibility is really important, but making sure that the responsibility of the employees to actually use data to make more informed decisions is more distributed and doesn't rely on only data specialists. And I think that's really the movement that we've been taking for a while. It's going to take quite a massive amount of time because it's a lot of changes. It means that everyone has to think about within my processes, within my ways of working, when should I be looking at data? How should I be looking at it? What kind of decision should I be making looking at it? But that's definitely the direction that we're taking, and making sure that the data specialists are mostly in charge of making sure that the right data is there, that it's clean, that it's easily accessible, and that people really understand it. They are more going to become enablers rather than people that are going to be the ones providing the insights and doing all of the work. I think that's really the movement that we're taking right now.
Yeah, absolutely seeing that widely. So we're going to close with Megan on the future. I think we're up against time, but Megan, I'm sure you can, maybe not one word or two, but you could give us a view of where you're moving, future direction.
Yeah, I think I'll just build on, we're moving into broadening and developing predictive analytics. What if scenarios, how can we do those more often and more consistently? And how can we leverage, there's so many tools that Domo has to offer, and how can we continue to leverage and explore those areas such as data science and predictive analytics.
Perfect. Well, we're up against time. In fact, we're a minute over. I want to thank you all for being so open and clear in your answers. It's a big topic for 45 minutes. We could easily spend 4.5 days on this. So just trying to get people a flavor of the things that you've learned and what you've seen is incredibly valuable. So thank you very much. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I know there are questions in the chat. I think Domo is going to capture those, and hopefully we'll go back to people after the event. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure to talk to you all.